Hello everyone. Today, I sit here to share with everyone another story in my soldier life. This is the second memory, a profound memory that I will never forget. The story is about a battle where Comrade Nam and I, two brothers, shot down two enemies, avenging the people of Thuong Doi Commune, Dong Thap. After capturing the scout alive last time, I didn't expect the story to spread so widely. Honestly, I only caught him by accident and didn't take any initiative. But the comrades in the unit kept blowing it up, and the scandal spread far and wide, and everyone knew about it. One time, I went to the riverbank to play. Just by listening I could hear people whispering, saying that our army had captured the Pol Pot scout alive. The riverbank was very crowded and bustling at that time. The front line was fighting fiercely, but the area where my company was stationed was relatively peaceful, only occasionally hearing gunshots echoing from afar. From the location where my company was stationed to the Dong Thap border, it must have been a few dozen kilometers, and from Thuong Doi Commune to the border was about 10 kilometers. Every time I went to the riverbank to play, I heard people telling stories and interacting. They kept repeating the story of the soldiers capturing the scout alive, which made me feel both happy and embarrassed. My story is actually not that big of a deal, just accidentally catching a spy, but when I heard people talking about it, I was also interested. Even so, I'm always modest, not wanting to brag too much. While I was talking by the river, a second sister came to invite me into her house. In the South, people often affectionately call me second sister or third sister, but I don't remember her name clearly. Hearing her invitation, I followed her into the house. Entering the house, I met Hai's mother. She was about 60 to 65 years old, thin, her eyes were wet from crying a lot. After talking for a while, I learned that her family had a nephew who had been missing for several months. He went to the front line, but since then there has been no news. Not knowing if he was shot dead by the enemy or captured alive, the whole family just knew that he was missing. While we were sitting and chatting, some kids around 15 years old also came to the house to play. Seeing the soldiers coming, the kids were excited, the people around were also curious. They asked me about the situation up above, how the war was, how our soldiers were. At that time, an old man told that in the upper area, there were two Uts who often traveled on a motorboat. In the north, we often called it a motorboat. But this motorboat did not belong to civilians, nor to traders, but was actually a boat of robbers. They often disguised themselves as civilians, defrauded and robbed people along the river, causing people to be very confused and scared. According to the villagers, every day they saw the two youngest brothers driving their boats towards the border. They shot at the people when they saw anyone working on the river. Every afternoon, their motorboat would appear and disappear, then disappear without a trace, and our army could not fight back. They continued to act so recklessly, making me extremely angry. At that time, I was still young and had a hot temper. Hearing the story made me feel angry and I just wanted to take action immediately to punish these two thugs. Originally, since the day I joined the Cambodian battlefield, I told myself to be determined and brave. At first, like many other teammates, I was still confused, but only in the first few battles. The more I got used to the sound of gunfire, even becoming very stubborn. I knew that when I went to the battlefield, there was no room for fear. If I retreated, I might lose my life. I always kept in mind that I could only fight to the end, die to win. When my unit was sent to the border of Honggu, Dong Thap, the battles became more fierce, but every time I heard about the cruelty of the enemy, I became more determined. To tell the story clearly, I will tell it in order, because if I tell it in a jumbled way, it will be difficult for me to remember everything. As for the garrison, at that time there was no regular army barracks. Our whole battalion had to stay in people's houses, many of which were abandoned, and some were scattered all over the place. That night, I decided to go to the company house to meet with Phong, the company commander, to ask for permission to ambush the two robbers. I told the whole story, clearly stating why I was upset. I said, "Brother Phong, let me go beat those two youngest brothers." I heard what the villagers said and I was so angry. I can't stand it anymore." However, Mr. Fong did not agree. He scolded me, said I was hasty, easily violated discipline, could not act arbitrarily. He told me to be calm, wait for orders from above, could not let personal reasons endanger the safety of the unit. Mr. Fong listened to my pleading, but still firmly refused. He said, "Fighting is not something you can do whenever you want. You have to be organized and have a proper plan. If you act on your own, what will you say to the battalion if something happens? Suppose you can't fight him and get shot dead, not only will you lose people but it will also affect the unit." I knew what Fong said was right, but I was still upset and couldn't sleep. Every night, I tossed and turned, thinking about the two enemies still running wild out there. My heart was boiling. The next morning, I went up to ask Fong to let me go and ambush them. I also asked for Comrade Nam to go with me. Comrade Nam was my close comrade in arms since the time we were at the border of Honggu, Dong Thap, and then to Cambodia. Comrade Nam was from Hanam Ninh, an extremely brave person, much more resilient than me. Every time the two of us entered the trenches together, we felt extremely secure. I trusted Comrade Nam, and he also trusted me absolutely. We are both stubborn brothers, especially in combat. With Comrade Nam with me, I feel confident, and I believe he does too. I kept persuading him, and finally Mr. Fong agreed, but he told me over and over again that I had to follow the rules and not act rashly. I chose to bring the RPD, because it was my assigned gun when training at the training ground. This is the gun I am very proficient with, and Comrade Nam brought the AK. The two of us borrowed a small boat from the locals, used a pole to prop it up, and slowly and quietly entered the ambush area. Sitting on the boat, my hand firmly holding the gun, my eyes wide open to observe, my heart was both excited and determined. This time, I not only wanted to destroy the enemy, but also wanted to restore justice for the people in Thuong Doi, where those two robbers still acted every day. While in training, we were taught how to swim and paddle boats, so we were proficient at paddle boats. Before leaving, Comrade Nam and I asked the locals carefully about the direction we were going, and they showed us the direction where the two enemies often appeared. I was very careful. Before leaving I marked landmarks, chose standard objects so that when returning I could easily orient myself, avoiding getting lost. Because in enemy territory, if I go in the wrong direction, not only will I lose my way, but I can also encounter great danger. When I invited Comrade Nam to go with me, he was also very interested and said, "I will go wherever we go to fight, as long as Comrade Cam is with me, I will feel secure." The two brothers silently rowed the boat, heading towards the ambush area. The landscape was vast with water, everywhere you could see sedge grass, scattered palm trees, occasionally there were small mounds of earth rising up like termite mounds in the middle of flooded fields. When we reached a suspicious area, we stopped. The water here was deep and vast, very convenient for the enemy to move their boats back and forth. We pushed the boat onto a sandbank and began digging fortifications. I brought an infantry shovel. The soil here was soft, easy to dig down about 50 centimeters, but as soon as I dug there, water flooded in. The two brothers sat in the bunker, only their heads showing, and camouflaged the surrounding area with grass, using sedge and wild plants to cover. Under the cold water, we lay still, keeping quiet, only our eyes and guns pointed towards the water. All our senses were tense, just a small movement, we were ready to act immediately. My brother and I camouflaged ourselves very carefully, from the guns, clothes to the fortifications. We used sedge and tree branches to cover ourselves so that from a distance of 5 to 6 meters we could not be detected. Comrade Nam also joked, "Now we are like two water snakes, as soon as the enemy comes, we will ambush them immediately." We waited patiently, but there was no movement. The two brothers decided to take the boat, row it about 25 meters from the shore, then tie it tightly to an underwater stake. We camouflaged the boat, letting it float naturally, like an abandoned boat. The idea was that if the enemy came, they would see the boat floating, thinking it was a civilian boat, thereby revealing their target and rushing closer. After preparing carefully, the two brothers sat down to eat dry food, watching the scenery, and patiently waiting. We went out to the boat, sat there from about 2 p.m., but by 4 p.m., there was still no sign of the two enemies. At that time, Comrade Nam began to get discouraged and said, "I'm out of luck today. Let's go home. We've been ambushing since this afternoon and haven't seen anything yet." "But I still don't want to give up," encouraged Comrade Nam. "Just be patient a little longer, it's almost sunset, they often appear at this time." The two brothers continued to ambush, lying still under the water, only their eyes showing. At about 5:30, the sun began to set, the evening light spread gold on the water, but still no enemy was seen. Both of us were getting tired and were about to retreat to our unit when suddenly, from afar, I heard a noise. I signaled to Comrade Nam to listen more carefully and whispered, "It must be coming. Prepare yourself." Both brothers held their breath, eyes wide open, waiting for the target to appear. The space was quiet at that moment, only the sound of the wind blowing through the grass could be heard. My heart was both excited and tense. My brother and I nodded, just waiting for the target to appear. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, from afar we saw two boats. "Run quickly." From the time of discovery, the initial distance from the ambush to the enemy boat was about 300 meters. Their boat circled back and forth. At first it seemed like they hadn't discovered anything, but when they saw the bait boat that my brother and I had camouflaged earlier, they became alert. The enemy boat did not go straight ahead, but kept circling around the bait boat. They were very clever, they did not approach immediately, but kept circling back and forth many times, as if to check the situation. On the boat, one man sat in front, clutching a machine gun tightly, the barrel pointing towards the bow of the boat. The other man sat in the back, steering, his eyes always looking around with vigilance. They kept circling around until they saw nothing suspicious, then they started to slow down and approach the bait boat. The driver was very clever, he didn't turn off the engine, just let the boat run slowly, very gently, as if drifting naturally with the water. The guy sitting in front put down his gun and stood up to look inside the boat. The distance was now only about 30 to 40 meters, but thanks to careful camouflage, my brother and I were still safe and had not been discovered. At that time, the afternoon sunlight from behind the two enemies shone back, creating a bright area, making it difficult for them to observe ahead. As for us, we were in the shade, combined with camouflage, they saw nothing suspicious. My brother and I whispered to discuss the plan. "Let it get a little closer, wait until it's ready to attack, then we'll make our move. But we have to stay calm. If we miss, with its machine gun, it will be difficult for us to escape." The atmosphere was tense, each passing second seemed to last forever. My brother and I held our guns tightly, ready to act. When the time was right, we would take action. The closer the two enemies got, the more obvious their movements became. The one sitting at the back started to pull the tail of the boat, steering the boat closer to the bait boat. He pulled the gear lever, then grabbed the raft, fixing the boat. The one sitting at the front still held the bow of the boat, his eyes constantly moving, looking around in a vigilant manner. They were all dressed in black, with scarves wrapped around their necks. At that time, I didn't know what this scarf was. Until I went to Cambodia, I understood that it was the Khmer Rouge's checkered scarf. But at that time, I only knew that the enemy had let their guard down, and this was the best opportunity to strike. I winked at Comrade Nam and whispered, "Okay, it's time to take them down. They're distracted now, we'll shoot first, making sure they don't have time to react." The two brothers divided the tasks. I aimed at the guy in front, and Comrade Nam would shoot the driver. At that time, I used the RPD, pulling 5 bullets in a row, then pausing for a beat, continuing to pull the trigger. Bullets flew out in a row, the sound was loud, sparks flew from the barrel. The first volley hit the target, the one in front. Collapsed immediately, the machine gun fell into the boat, he died on the spot. I continued to pull the trigger, each bullet tore through the air, pinning straight to the target. In total I had fired more than half of the RPD magazine, about 50 to 60 bullets. Comrade Nam did not delay, he used the AK, cleared the entire magazine, continuously fired more than 100 bullets at the two enemies. Smoke billowed, the sound of bullets echoed. In just a few short seconds, everything was completely silent. Both men lay motionless, the boat rocking on the water, but there was no life left. The two brothers remained vigilant, slowly approaching, checking carefully to make sure there was no danger. After the first round of bullets, I clearly saw the guy sitting in front collapsed on the bottom of the boat, blood everywhere. But what worried my brother and I was that we couldn't see the second guy anywhere. When shooting, my main target was the guy holding the machine gun, and Comrade Nam would deal with the guy sitting behind. However, after the first guy fell, we still couldn't see the other guy. Both eyes scanned. I looked around carefully, but there was absolutely no movement. I began to suspect that the second guy might have been hiding under the boat, hiding to ambush us. To be safe, I pulled the trigger, firing 10 more bullets straight into the bottom of the boat, where he might be hiding. The thought that if my brother and I waited out, he might return fire, made me extremely alert. After that series of bullets, there was still no movement, everything was eerily quiet. Comrade Nam whispered to me. "It must be dead, or else it's too badly injured to fight back." I carefully checked the gun again, left the RPD on the shore, and prepared to wade out to check. Comrade Nam held the AK, supporting me, and both of us approached the enemy boat. At this time, the body of the guy sitting in front was still lying on the bow of the boat. Bullets had penetrated from the stomach to the face, blood and internal organs. Overflow, flow down the boat. My brother and I looked inside the boat, but still could not see the second man anywhere. The silence made us tense, all our senses were highly focused. There was no other way. We climbed onto the boat, climbing and observing, preparing to respond to any situation. Both feet stepped lightly, hands held the gun tightly, eyes looked at every corner. We knew, just a little carelessness, could cost us our lives. The enemy boat was punctured in several places after being hit by bullets, but very little water entered, and the boat was still afloat. My brother and I looked around, but still could not see the second guy anywhere. After a while of searching, I discovered his leg, still stuck deep in the mud, head down, only the foot sticking out. He was lying in shallow water, looking down from above. I saw his foot was pale white, but not moving at all. I grabbed his leg and pulled him up. It turned out he was also hit by a bullet in the stomach, causing his intestines to spill out. He lost too much blood, so when he fell down, his head was stuck straight into the mud and he couldn't lift it up. When I pulled his body up, I saw that he was still holding a watch in his hand. I didn't know whose watch it was, but it showed that he had been dead for a long time. His hand was stiff and lifeless. The body of the guy sitting in front was no better. Blood and guts scattered all over the boat. The stench began to rise strongly. Without hesitation, my brother and I dragged the bodies of both men and threw them straight into the river, to clean the bottom of the boat. To cover the bullet holes, I tore the fabric of my shirt, stuffed it into the holes, and tied it tightly with rope to prevent water from getting in. We also tied the enemy boat together, preparing to tow it back. Comrade Nam struggled with the boat engine, but could not get it to start, perhaps because the machine was broken or he did not know how to start it. Finally, there was no other way. The two brothers had to manually prop the boat, using a pole to push the boat back. To avoid being detected, we tied the enemy boat to our boat, then used force to pull both of them back to the unit. When we opened fire, the sound of bullets echoed far away, so that both the people and the unit could hear it. I knew that when we returned, there would certainly be many questions waiting for us. When my brother and I rowed the boat back to the unit, we saw soldiers and villagers waiting at the river wharf. They used a motorboat to row out to pick us up and help us pull the boat to shore. As soon as we arrived, I saw a large crowd of people gathered. Everyone was happy and cheering. They brought cakes, bottles of water, and some even brought out a tray of food to treat the soldiers. The feeling of warmth and happiness made Comrade Nam and I feel all our fatigue disappear. When we returned, we met Mr. Fong, the company commander. Although he was happy for the two brothers, he could not hide his anger. He smiled and blamed lovingly. "Stop talking nonsense. If the regiments and battalions hear this, they will curse me to death. You guys took a risk, luckily you succeeded, otherwise if something happened, how would I know what to say?" Even though he tried to hide it, good news spread far and wide. His comrades in the unit also heard the story. People gossiped. It couldn't be hidden forever. Just 1 or 2 days later, in the afternoon, the battalion called me up. When I arrived, I met Comrade Gwyn, who was the battalion commander at that time. Comrade Gwyn was from Nam Dinh. Later, when peace was restored, he was transferred to the 126th Special Forces Group, stationed in Phan Rang, Thap Cham. Mr. Gwyn welcomed us very warmly, poured us water, invited us to sit down, but did not forget to gently scold us. "Comrades, what you are doing is undisciplined. You cannot act arbitrarily in battle. If you are lucky, you will succeed, otherwise the consequences will be unpredictable." Although he was blaming, I could still hear a bit of pride in his voice. He smiled happily and said that when he heard the villagers talk about it, he was also upset, but when he learned that the two brothers had made their own achievements, he admired their bravery. Mr. Gwyn encouraged. "Brave fighting spirit of you comrades is very commendable. The unit is very proud of you too. You are so stubborn even though you just joined the army. You will definitely achieve many more victories in the future." Comrade Gwyn's words of encouragement made my brother and I very excited. Feels like all the effort is worth it. And then, just a week later, we received some good news. After this feat, I was appointed squad leader, a major turning point in my soldier's life. The story I just told, not only Comrade Nam was a witness, but many brothers in the unit also knew clearly. Until now, the comrades who are still alive still recall the feat of my brother and I, that we avenged the people of Thuong Doi Commune, bringing peace to the border area. Later, when we reached the border, the fighting became even more fierce. Especially in December, near December 22nd, when we were mobilized to the border, we saw how fierce the battlefield really was. Pol Pot soldiers there were very aggressive, had strong firepower, and were also much larger in number. They often hid, used modern weapons, and created unequal battles. Many of my comrades fell, but no one retreated. All were determined to die to keep every inch of the border. Bloody battles, life and death, there were times when I thought it would be difficult for me to return. But team spirit and strong will help me overcome everything. In those battles, Comrade Nam and I also achieved many other feats. Once, the two brothers defeated 2 snipers, a battle that was also dramatic and dangerous. But I will tell this story next time, so that you can understand more clearly about my soldier life. Thank you for listening to my story. See you in the next stories.